She started the NGO Shelter Associates in 1994. Its mission is to reduce urban poverty through initiatives in low-cost housing and sanitation. It has architects, social workers, GIS analysts, and community workers. It works in cooperation with local NGOs in various places. Urban poverty is the bane of all developing countries, and India is a leading example. Millions of people live in urban slums in subhuman conditions. Through Shelter Associates, Pratima has helped over 370,000 people by providing safe sanitation. It has also launched a one home, one toilet mission that has set up more than 22,000 household toilets in the slums of Maharashtra, in Pune, Kolhapur, Thane, Sangli, and other cities. Pratima has also undertaken social housing efforts in Pune and slum rehabilitation projects in Kolhapur, which have helped thousands. She has received numerous awards, including the Google Earth Hero Award for using Google technology for poverty mapping. She has also received the NASSCOM Social Innovation Forum 2017 award. Pratima presents her work extensively across the world at universities, governments, and social welfare organizations. Today, Pratima will give us glimpses into her work and an idea of her achievements in low-cost housing and sanitation. For those of you who were not here to hear what Sujeesh said, she is my classmate and a friend. So we've known each other for like 40 odd years. So welcome, Pratima.
You'll have to unmute yourself. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you so much. In fact, I would like to start by saying that I was very delighted that I was given this opportunity. And I've been talking to some of you. And I said that there are really two reasons why I'm really delighted, because the first time that I've been given an opportunity to talk to Chennai, it's a city which is very close to my heart because I grew up there. It's only after my marriage that I shifted to Pune. But I have such great memories of my childhood and growing up and going to college and all that. I visit Chennai very often also because my family, my brothers continue to live there. And the second reason, of course, is that it was such a pleasure when Beena, asked me if I would talk to all of you. And I said, yes, why not? I mean, she's doing such great work herself. So Beena, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. And somebody said, I thought the poor were just people who probably didn't have enough resources. I'm not very sure what is the difference between the urban and the rural poor. There is a lot of difference, but because we have grown up in the urban, context in cities, I've been in cities all my life. We decided that let us look at, the people who are really making our cities, making them throb and thrive. Today, most of us are able to do a lot of things because there are some people in our cities who are holding, tasks and chores that otherwise we would need to be really doing day in and day out. And by this, I mean, the maids who come in, our drivers, the gardener, the paper wala. I mean, there are just so many services that are being provided by the informal sector that we take for granted. We take so many services for granted, running tap water, electricity, a toilet in the house. Most of us have 2, if not 3. These are services that we so many things that we take for granted, and we really don't know whether the have-nots in the city have access to them. So I was just looking at some of the statistics for cities, and I was looking at Chennai also, and I was a little taken aback when I saw that there are over 2,000 slums in Chennai city, and the population living in slums is anywhere close to 30% as it stands now. That's not a small number. And these numbers are growing in every city. If you look at Maharashtra, I think it's one of the most urbanized states. We have an urban to rural ratio of 48:50. So we are almost there, 50-50. And we have anywhere between 35 to 40% of our population living in slums in Pune alone. And in Mumbai, we have over 50% of Mumbai's population living in shanty towns. And this number is growing. So when I graduated, I thought I would want to work in the development sector. When I did architecture in Anna University, and then I went abroad and I did a course called the Building Design for Developing Countries in London at the Bartlett School of Architecture. By the time I was through with that degree, I knew that I would come back and work in the development sector because I wanted to see how relevant my profession could be in adding value to the have-nots of the cities whom we've been taking for granted. So I'm going to share my screen and just let me know if you all can see it at your end. I'm on the presentation mode. Is it visible?
Yeah, it is visible. It is visible.
Great. So, having in an urban setting, in an upper middle class family, having gone to some of the finest schools and colleges, I've never really had an opportunity to walk through slums. And when I made that decision, it was like, plunging into the pool without knowing how to swim. So the first time that I really started walking through slums was when we decided that, yes, we wanted to do something for the urban poor. And when we started walking through the slum, we realized the kind of apathy that was there in terms of providing very basic services. Of course, people were sort of barely making ends meet. So, they were already impoverished without having access to basic services. And of course, where the government or the city managers were concerned, it was the lowest on their priority. There's just so much apathy when it comes to delivering services for the poor. So I just thought I'll share a couple of slides which tell you what is the objective of the NGO that we decided to form. There were a few architects who got together, a couple of my friends who are architects. And in 1994, we formally registered Shelter Associates. So it's been an almost 3-decade-long journey. And our vision was really how we could bring dignity to people living in informal settlement so that they have a slightly elevated quality of life. And of course, our mission was having, at least trying to give every Indian access to some of the most basic services and infrastructure and security of tenure. So today, as Shelter stands, we have a mixed bag of people. We have GIS experts, we have social workers, we have planners, we have architects. So we have people from the community who work full time with us. As Bina has rightly said, we have impacted close to 4 lakh people with a household toilet, either directly or indirectly. We have invested a lot in mapping poverty, and I'll let you know why we even chose to do something like that. And we've also been doing a lot of housing projects as and when the opportunity presented itself. So why did we focus so much on sanitation? We launched this model, one home, one toilet, in 2013 after a journey of almost 7 to 8 years where we were doing a lot of sanitation in slum. So we were rather taken aback, when we did our first surveys of slums in the city of Pune, which was really in the late 90s, early 2000, leveraging technology for the first time. The need was because we realized that government have very little data about slums. And when you have a large percentage of your city living in slum, then you have no data. Obviously, you have no clue. You're clueless about what needs to be provided. So the provisions are very ad hoc. The schemes are very ad hoc. And most of them, of course, fail on the ground because they are not, sort of driven by data or hard facts on the ground. And when we did our first survey in the city of Pune, it hit us that while water was not so badly off, they were not so badly off in terms of water or electricity, sanitation was the most neglected sector. There were huge numbers of people who were defecating in the open or using very, very dirty community toilets. And even in Pune at that time, there were barely 22% families who had access to a home toilet, which was such a luxury. And I think now with Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, all the noise that has been made around it, most of us know that how terrible it is if you have to, sort of hold your bladder. I don't know how many of you have had to hold your bladder even for a few hours and know the urgency of, having to use a toilet. But there have been several studies which have shown that in slums, sometimes women are holding their bladder as long as 13 hours because they don't have a place to go, and relieve themselves. You have so many children who die of waterborne diseases, and especially, under the age of 5, we are losing so many. Every 2 minutes, India lost a child. There's so much of fear when it comes to safe sanitation, and especially when people have to go out and defecate in the open. Women especially face huge problems. There are sexual assaults, stone pelting, all kinds of abuses that they are subjected to. And the shared sanitation facilities, of course, that is provided by the government like a one glove fits all. I think across the country, the only solution that governments have traditionally given slums is a community toilet. So when we did our study and we realized that, there's a huge lacuna when it comes to data, and that's the reason why the governments are really not able to reach out to people with facilities that are really required. We decided to embark upon a data journey. So we have a very, very data-driven approach to whatever we do, whether it's sanitation, whether it's housing, whether it's electricity, whether it's water. Unless we have hard data on the ground, we don't do it. The second thing that we really invest a lot of energy in is in getting communities mobilized. We run awareness programs very intensively, right from small children to the youth, to the women, to the men. So whether it's sanitation, water, housing, unless you engage with them, unless you bring in awareness, unless you make them feel that this project is theirs and they are very much central to the entire process, you'll never kind of end up with sustainable projects. So community involvement is absolutely a must. And the third thing that we have always followed is that it should be a cost sharing model. There cannot be a freebie given to anyone. Even the poor invest in it financially, so it's not free. And let's see how we do it. So let me start with the data. In slums, we literally capture everything that is there. So we do something called the infrastructure mapping, which means every chamber, every manhole, every water stand post, every electric pole, every dump place or a garbage bin, we map, and every house, we map all of that. And, then we number every house, we give it a number, and then we run rapid surveys, rapid household surveys. So we cover 100% of the households in the. And then all this data and all this mapping information is brought onto a platform called the Geographic Information System platform. I think some of you might have even heard of it. It's fairly common nowadays. People say GIS based data. So this is exactly what we started out doing in the late 90s, when the government also in Pune, there was just one computer with the Pune Municipal Corporation, which was in the buildings department, and people didn't know what were the different parts of the computer. I still remember in the late 90s when we had a bunch of officers coming to our office. They were saying, what's a mouse? What's a keyboard? It was so basic. But that was the time when we were using geographic information systems and trying to, integrate data, because we realized very early on that if you have to manage such vast data sets, then you cannot but, use technology to do that. So we started using GIS technology very early on. And then the next thing that we used as soon as it was launched was Google Earth. We started using Google Earth as our base map. So we started inputting all our data on Google Earth. And of course, then as the years went by and mobiles became very common, we started using mobile technology to capture data. So from paper-driven survey went to mobile data collection. And then, of course, now we are on open source platform. So we have also started publishing all our data on our website. I would really invite all of you, whenever you have a little time, do take a look at our website, because you'll see so much of the data published on it. So we engaged with the poor, and we got a lot of data, collection done with them. And that's why we got very good quality data. We did the mapping. We got the municipal corporations to co-create that data with us. So I just feel that, when you engage people, when you partner with them, when they feel that they can trust something, that's when you get the best results. So whenever you and I talk of data, I'm always very suspicious. Where is this data coming from? Is it authentic? Is it up to date? I mean, these are things that, which crops up in everybody's mind. But today, we have all the cities validating our data. So they come to the ground and check the data that we give them. And that is why it has built an enormous confidence. It has brought in enormous clarity. And, the communities as well as the government, because they've engaged with the data, they're willing to use it. So all the data that we've published on our website, every city has linked their website to our website, so that that data becomes available not only in the public domain, but available to a much wider audience through their website. So as you can see in this particular slide, that's the municipal commissioner of the Thane city, and he's actually on a site visit looking at our at the mapping information and checking some of the data there. We do a lot of training with the government people so that they also learn how to use that data on the ground. As I said, we use community mobilization activities. During COVID, we found that people were so scared. They were very worried to use common facilities, especially a community toilet, because at the rate it was growing, we had patients and cases in slums and in other parts of the city. People were really terrified. So we had to really run campaigns. So while most of the people were at home because of the lockdown, we were all on the ground, making sure, with PPE kits and whatnot, that we were actually trying to work with slum communities, raising awareness around COVID, making sure that they were, wearing a mask, trying to observe whatever social distancing they could, because it's not easy to observe social distancing in slum. And we were doing it all through very creatively. So we have snake and ladder games, maze games. I mean, we think of just about everything that you can to drive home the point, how important it is to do hand washing and, keep your places sanitized. So there was a lot of effort. So community mobilization is a very powerful tool when you want to engage and get communities to, take charge of their situation. And of course, we've had great partners. We've recently partnered with UNICEF around in the wash sector, especially during the pandemic. We continue to partner with them. And we have also been able to show the impact of all this work that we have been doing with data to our various donors and corporate bodies who have very, very strongly supported the sanitation cause. Can you see this particular impact in one of the settlements in Pune? It's very prominently located. It's very visible when you're actually driving down to the airport. This was a slum. On the left, what you see was, was how it was prior to intervention. All the houses in blue were using just one community toilet, which was right at the top. And if you can see that red band there, that was the toilet they all used. It was heavily under stress because for every one seat, there were 226 people using it. It was as good as not being there. So you can imagine there was so much of open defecation that was happening as a result of that. If you see that orange spot, which we have shown in the map, that is where people were going for defecating in the open. The same settlement, post-intervention, all the houses in pink are the ones who have their own toilet. So from 1:26, the ratio came down to 1:54. So for every seat now, there are 54 people using it, which brought the pressure on community toilet blocks. It's really brought it down, it reduced the pressure. And because most people started having a toilet at home, so the health of that community also has improved rather. And open defecation completely stopped there. This is the kind of impact that you can see. can you see the houses and the finishes of toilets within, within each toilet? Everything looks different because people not only invested in constructing their own toilet, they actually invested in their finishes. We were very pleasantly surprised that, we gave them basic material at their doorstep for constructing a toilet. We gave them bricks, we gave them sand, we gave them cement, we gave them a pan, we gave them a few boxes of tiles so that they could have some kind of a backsplash. But they all went all out and invested in finishes. So apart from, the cost of constructing the toilet, they also invested additionally in the finishes. And when, a TV channel went around interviewing them, some of them had, kacha houses where their homes are maybe tin sheds, but their houses are their toilets are pakka and very well finished. And the women said, when we go to work, and they, these are people who are working in houses like yours and mine. And when they see our toilets, they're very aspirational. So they wanted to have a good toilet at home. So they went all out, and these are not branded tiles. So they're not very expensive. It's something that they're willing to invest in. And and this simple, this act of facilitating a toilet in their house also led to home improvements. We've done a survey across cities. We worked in 7 cities of Maharashtra, and over 40% families either have partially or fully improved their homes. And it all started with the toilet. So, it was, we are absolutely delighted to see the kind of impact it has had on the lives of individual families. I'll just share one or two, things that come through very strongly, responses, especially young girls. They say, when we ask them, so are you using your toilet? And they say, of course we are. And has it, what difference has it made? And they say, for the first time in years, we have been able to eat without thinking about how much food should I take, how much water can I drink in the evening, foregoing dinners sometimes because I don't want to use a community toilet late in the night. I have to wake my father or wake my mother or somebody who has come with me. And again, that toilet may not be very close at hand. I might have to walk for 5 or 10 minutes before I reach. It can be dark. You don't, sometimes they don't have lights. And there are times when some of the toilet blocks are even closed in the nights. After 11, people don't have access to a community toilet. So women and girls have been making sure in many cases that they don't eat after 6 or 6:30 in the evening. And I thought it was so heartbreaking that, so many people have to think so much before even drinking water and eating food, which most of us don't even think about. Uh, I just thought, let me also share some of the citywide impacts that we've had. In Pune, as I said, when pre-intervention, barely 26 to 28% families had a toilet at home. Today, it has gone up to almost 60% over the last 6 years. Pimpri-Chinchwad, which is one of the richest municipal corporations, not just in Maharashtra, but in the country, 8% families had a toilet. It's gone up to 57%, and we have 100% data for Pimpri-Chinchwad. And even the drainage network coverage, from barely 37%, it went up to 68%, and the city is still investing in it. Kolhapur was a wonderful city to work in, and the citywide impact is that today we have almost 67% families residing in slums who have a toilet at home, and the swing was from 27 to 67. And it's the same story in every city. So the urban local bodies leveraged our data, and they have invested very heavily in laying drainage network or cleaning up, the existing choke sewer lines or repairing them. So there's a lot of funding that got leveraged, because we did data, which brought so much clarity and confidence in the process. I don't know how many of you have ever visited slums and see the kind of houses in which people live. Typically you will see that 3 walls are shared, right? There's only one wall through which you have some amount of light and ventilation that comes in. It's fairly dark, most of the houses. They need electricity in some houses 24/7, especially if their houses off a very narrow lane. And I've always wondered how people even survive in that kind of, humdrum, how children are able to study when you have, blaring television sets just next door, or people fighting, all the noise with all the running sewage, in front of their house. And, people are just trying to eke a living there. I mean, this is the kind of pathetic conditions in which most slums are sort of living in, most slum dwellers are living in. And all this has impacted them very, very adversely. So you find that, whether it's health, uh, education, livelihoods, I mean, just about everything, gets impacted when your well-being is not taken care of, your physical and mental well-being, because the environment itself is not enabling in that sense. And whatever interventions governments make across the country, I would say, it's sometimes a very top-down kind of an approach. They think that they know best for the poor, and they know what kind of housing solution to be given. And often you find that suddenly slum dwellers, get transported into very, very high buildings, which are completely unsustainable. I mean, the first thing that fails mostly is the lift over there. You'll find lifts don't work. You find there dark, dingy spaces. People are really crammed into what I call vertical slums. Or you find that they are thrown to the outskirts of the city, where, in a city like Sangli, I was shocked that, people didn't even know, the city didn't know that most of them used chullas, or smokeless chullas, or whatever it is, biomass fuel for cooking. And they gave them stand-up kitchens, and, they tried to give them a house like yours and mine, which absolutely didn't work for them. And because they were in the outskirts, they were so badly networked with the rest of the transport system that they were driven deeper into poverty instead of, having an elevated quality of life. If you can see, this was like the kind of situation that they encountered when they went into their new houses, which was supposedly giving them a better quality of life. So this is again something where we've used a very data-driven approach. Can I just, how much time I have, so that I sort of keep myself well within that? Do I have another 5 minutes?
Yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So what we have been doing is, we've been looking at slums at a citywide level. In the city of Sangli, Meerut, Kupwad, we 100% mapped the slum settlement. We looked at what were the tenable slums, which were not tenable, where slums would need to move at a future date, and how you could maybe do land pooling to get them to share land, because all of us know land is such a precious resource. You can't create land. So if you don't use your land optimally, you are going to be in deeper trouble, as the years roll by. So we did an experiment where we did a whole citywide planning for the urban poor of Sangli city, which was approved by the government of India. And, they gave an incredibly huge funding for this particular project, because they thought it had so much merit. And we involved the slum communities. We did the design with them. We walked them through, the entire process, and we made sure that women were very involved, because at the end of the day, she's the homemaker. And after that, what got built, I mean, if you look at the before and after, the after will hardly give you a sense of that this was a slum a few years ago. It's a complete transformation. And people, we gave them a shell, because again, government funding is not unlimited. They were given a shell, and if you look at the interiors that people invested in, it's amazing. People went all out and invested in their flooring, in the finishes, and they might be tiny houses, just 300 square feet, but they're also nicely done. That it's a pleasure to go, and people maintain it because they are, financial buy-in is there, and they have been involved in the process right from the beginning. So, getting them to be in the process from starting to end is very important. And I'll just show you one more last slide, which sort of highlights the work that we're doing right now. and that is giving digital addresses to every hut. Uh, One of the things that we noticed and which came as a bit of a shock to the cities, especially during the pandemic, was they were unable to track and monitor COVID patients in slum. Because I think all of you may know or may not that thousands of families who live in a slum don't have a locational address. The only address they have is the name of the slum. So if they have to, if you need to reach a particular family, it's almost impossible. Very often, they have to come to the come to some kind of a landmark and then take you there. So very often they don't receive their postal services at home. They cannot leverage any online service or any emergency service because nobody knows how to get in and where to go. And so when the pandemic broke out, the governments really were in for a bit of a shock because they didn't know how to manage, this whole thing in the slums, which was spreading so rapidly. So we've partnered with Google, and what we're doing is, leveraging plus codes, which is like an, alphanumeric kind of a code based on the lat long location of the hut. So if you put that the lat long address on Google Map, you literally reach the doorstep. And this has been a very exciting project for us because now we are trying to give every house an address, and we are trying to see if the governments can get to institutionalize this data so that this becomes very, very useful in tracking, monitoring services, and just about everything that you need to be able to sort of provide in terms of services to the slums, not just solid waste management or water or sanitation, but even when you talk of health, education, livelihood effort, you can just about anybody can use this data and build upon it and make it richer, and it will just help the city to govern these areas much, much better, because this is a great planning tool. Having this kind of data, it really, really opens up so many possibilities. It really helps you plug all the gaps that are there in the delivery of all these services. And eventually, it would really enhance the quality of living for our people who are doing yeoman service, I think, in holding the city together. So I think with that, I'll stop because I'll be happy to field questions if there are. Um,
Yeah, see, we do have challenges on this in Chennai too. Particularly the sewage lines. The houses have toilets. They use the stormwater drains as the sewage. It is very common in Chennai, and the corporation is not in a position to provide them an alternate route to channelize the sewage. And here, I think we are the only river which was flowing through Chennai, the Kuam, has been a sewage canal, has been converted into a sewage canal. That's how we are here. So the challenges are the same. And as you said, the slum clearance board builds up tenements which are very far away from their workplace. And the usual thing, they rent out the place and come back to the slums or go to a newer slum. That is what is happening here too. But how did you arrange for the financing for these people to build up these
with the
toilets?
toilet.
Yeah.
Right. So we didn't arrange for their finance. They arranged it themselves. What we did was we leveraged funding from corporate bodies, and we made sure that they had the basic material delivered at their doorstep. So whether it was brick, cement, sanitary ware, door, maybe a small ventilator. So these were some of the basic materials that we delivered at their doorstep, and they raised their own. Most of them didn't even have to pay any lender because the cost of construction was something like between 8 to 9,000 rupees. Most of them were able to very ingeniously raise that and complete the construction of their own toilets.
And yeah, when you had asked us about our projects, toilets for schools was one of the projects that we had done. I think we had constructed more than four. I'm not sure of the numbers, but I think almost 450 toilets during a 2-year period. And one of the
Right.
challenges we faced was a source of water maintenance. So
Right.
we construct the toilets and give it to them, and they expect you to maintain the toilets too. In some places, we're even doing that from our club.
So this is typically the problem that is associated with community toilets, whether it's in the school or whether it's in slum, maintenance becomes a huge issue. And I personally always believe that a community toilet is a stopgap solution. It can never be a permanent solution for anyone. So how the way we have tackled it now, for instance, in the city of Kolhapur, where we are now, where we've reached a certain threshold of home toilets, the existing community toilets, we are now in the process of seeing if those seats can be divided between families, because it has now got reduced to say one seat for say 3 families or 2 families. So if those 3 families can be assigned a particular seat for which they have their lock-in keys, then they are the ones who maintain it. So then, it gets maintained. Municipal corporation is not burdened because it's a huge recurring capital kind of a cost that they're incurring year after year after year. And it becomes quite a huge burden, especially for smaller cities. So this is how, you try and reduce the pressure on CTBs, you try and reduce the person to toilet ratio as much as possible, and then see if there are ways in which you can involve the community people to do the maintenance. And that definitely would work.
Pratima, I have a question. How do you start? Like you go and first identify a locality. Is that the way you start?
So it's also sometimes by word of mouth, because when we sometimes get an invitation from sometimes even counselors or other NGOs who are working in a particular slum. Just one example in Pune, there was an NGO which was working in the education sector in one of the hilltop slums of Pune. And one of the issues that they ran into again and again was, they had built a shed where they were running this program for the children, and every time, and this shed was abutting an open space, which was sort of fenced because it was privately owned. And this guy had built in a fence so that people will not step in and defecate there. So a part of that wall was the fence. And very often people would just break open a bit of that wall so that they could get into that open space to defecate. So they came to us saying that, we are all the time facing this problem. Is there a way in which you can help us with it? So that was one way, we got introduced to that slum. But by word of mouth also, there are, people who have relatives in different slums. So somewhere it becomes a starting point. And then, of course, it has a rippling effect. But there are times also when we go to the city and talk to the municipal commissioner. For instance, when we started our work in Kolhapur, we didn't start with one slum. We actually went to the head of the city, the municipal commissioner, and we showed him the project that we had done in a neighboring city. And when he saw that, he was very impressed. He said, I really would like this to happen in my city. And then we started with data, because, then you start getting a good feel for the situation on the ground. So we normally start with data, but we make sure that before we enter any slum, we start talking to the municipal corporation, to the ward offices, to the elected representatives. Because one thing, mind you, you should never work in a slum without taking them into confidence. At the end of the day, they are the elected representatives. They should not feel threatened by your presence there. So whatever work we've done has always been a collaborative effort. So it's stakeholder participation all the time. We also have a memorandum of understanding with all these cities where we've done our work, where the city, it's a non-financial one because, we get our funding from outside, but we very clearly list out their roles and responsibilities, our roles and responsibilities. And we also make sure that the municipal commissioner or an officer, at the level of a deputy commissioner or an additional commissioner, convenes a meeting once a month or as stipulated in that MOU, to take, review of the work, so that if there are bottlenecks, they're addressed in time and it sort of doesn't spiral out of control. So these are a few mechanisms that we put in place right before we start any project.
See, many of the slums have got an issue because they are illegal.
All slums are illegal.
Yeah, okay. Sorry. Sorry, I worded it wrongly. They are illegal. Now, how can government get involved in, because always they're trying to evict them. So how do you feel whether the government is kind of, formalizing this, like when the government gets involved in putting up a toilet, it's trying to formalize the thing, regularize it. So how do you tackle it?
So, one thing good that this present government has done is that they've unbundled services and security of tenure. So when I say all slums are illegal, that's a fact. Nobody owns that piece of land. Only the structure above that is theirs. But if that security of tenure is going to be linked to services, then you are in for a very miserable situation, because their open defecation is going to affect the rest of the city, right?
Okay.
And we have sometimes slums which are right at the heart of our cities. It's not like they're all on the peripheral. They're all spread across the city. And their well-being is absolutely important for the well-being of the rest of the citizens. So what luckily they have done is they've unbundled it. So they are saying that every citizen, irrespective of whether they are in a notified slum or a non-notified slum, has rights to access to water, sanitation, and some of these very basic amenities. So that is why we have sort of been able to leverage that and make sure that everybody gets access to this.
So one more question from me. What is the value of the items that you give? You give them tiles and cement and doors or whatever. What's the value like?
It works out to, see, if there is a sewerage connection to which they can connect, then it works out to somewhere around 14,000 rupees for the material that is supplied. But if there is no possibility of a connection, and if they have to do it on a septic tank, then it can go up quite a bit, because then it can go up anywhere close to 25,000, because they have to either build a septic tank underneath, or buy a ready-made one and install it. So and of course it also varies a little bit from city to city.
Thank you. Thank you.
But see, usually in slums there is no access for lorries. So how do you remove the sludge from the septic tanks once it gets full?
No, so we have so now you have these um, I mean,
Biomass.
lorry doesn't have to go into every lane. It's not even possible. But they have these long pipes, suction pipes. So we make sure that it is within reach, so that when they have to desludge the tank, that shouldn't be an obstruction. But having said that, I want to say that almost 80% of the projects that we have done have had toilets connected to sewerage networks, which eventually go to the, uh, what are those things called?
STP, sewage treatment plant.
STP, the sewage
STP.
treatment plants. So we've only in some cities, where parts of the city itself has no networks. Like in the city of Kolhapur, we've done a few slums which are completely either connected to a biogas plant or a septic tank. Those are the only areas, where maybe barely 15-20% of our toilets have been either on septic tanks or biogas. But even there, we have tried to see if there is a way. See, there are other possibilities also. Sometimes if you, like we did this whole biogas project, where the government made available, an empty plot for building the biogas plant, and then they invested in all the drainage lines which led to the biogas plant. So every house got connected to the drainage line, the sewerage line rather, which eventually went into the biogas plant. So it's not like you need to desludge every individual septic tank. You can have a common septic tank to which it can be led. So depending on the ground situation and what are the possibilities, we decide on what to choose.
Great. That's great.
And at times it is very complicated. Like we had one case here in Padur, near Ambattur, where the World Bank had funded for the entire sewerage system. And that particular project had a high interest component. So the connection charge per household worked out to around 25,000 rupees. And the households, so a few of the households were ready to pay that, but the housing associations were dead against it, asking for the government to give a rebate on it or on an installment basis, which the government was reluctant. And it went on for 5 years, and they were letting all their sewage into a lake nearby, and NGT had to really pull these people by the collar and make them give connections. For 5 years, and a facility was lying idle, and the lake was getting polluted.
Right. So here, of course, from city to city, it can vary, but we've tried to prevail upon the urban local bodies to give it to them without additional cost, because anyway people do pay for the cost of connecting their toilets to the line. So that is a cost that they do bear. So additionally, they don't bear any connection charges over and above that.
Any more questions?
Yeah,
If not,
Pratima,
yeah,
Pratima,
yeah,
my
go ahead.
question to you has always been, when are you coming down to Chennai to do this for us?
So maybe the Rotary Club can take a decision and involve us in maybe a pilot project somewhere in Chennai. I'll be happy to make a start.
Yeah,
Yeah, we should.
we'll definitely work on that. We'll definitely work
I
on
think we should look into that.
that. Yeah, we'll definitely work on that. Yeah.
I would
I
invite
request.
all of you to look at the website also, because there's a lot
Sure.
of stuff that we put up on it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you.
Request Shyamlaji to propose a vote of thanks.
Thank you, Pratima, for that talk on. It was not only impactful, your work is so very impacting for the stakeholders, the slum dwellers. And I would like to, mention something which I have experienced personally and very related to whatever you said from my observation.